I'm amazed. Thank you, Bella. So I'm Denise Ellerick, a new board member, and I'm here to present the Hammer of Justice Award with the emphasis on hammer to Elizabeth Caballero and Jonathan Gettleman. I met them for lunch a few weeks ago after we had nominated them, and my mind was continually just blown away. Partly because of the work that I do and the complaints that I hear with no ability to have any restitution or even be heard because of fear of retaliation. And Jonathan, you can look at their website. I won't read things verbatim, but Jonathan and Elizabeth came in 2015. They formed a law practice doing a lot of successful criminal defense. But more recently, they have shifted the focus of their practice entirely to police abuses and jail conditions nearly exclusively. And I want to be mindful of if you pray or meditate, I want to be mindful of what I'm about to say. And I also want to acknowledge the children here. So this might be hard to hear for children's ears. But the work that Jonathan and Elizabeth are doing barely makes the media. You won't see it on a transparency portal on the police websites or the sheriff's website. These are voices of people that are ignored and victims of police abuse and deaths in the jails, and their families are suffering greatly because no one knows the pain that they experience. And I just deeply appreciate Elizabeth and Jonathan for elevating their voices. It's just cruel and wrong. And when we have a jail that basically is a torture chamber in our community, and we don't know and we ignore it. Some of their recent cases, there have been 2 wrongful death cases in the Santa Cruz County Jail that you may have seen in the media, thank goodness. And they highlight several systemic problems in the county jail. One is German Carrillo, who was 23 when he was brutally murdered by his cellmates and not located in his own bed for 36 hours. That was 36 safety checks required by law while German was dead that did not turn up his body in his own cell. He was 23 and he had been waiting 6 years for trial. This case highlights how much leeway gangs are given to run their unit with impunity. It also highlights the long-standing problems of errant classification, non-functioning emergency buttons, falsified safety check logs, understaffing, and overcrowding. You may have read in the media that German was a gang member, and sometimes that is thrown out to kind of get us off the trail, but there's no evidence that German was in a gang, and that has been very painful, I think, for the community who's lost their son and for the family. And I deeply regret, I'm very sorry for their loss. And if you pray, if you light a candle, will you please keep them in your thoughts? The other wrongful death case was a young man known by some of us here. His name is Tamario Smith. And Tamario suffered from schizophrenia, and he was 21 years old, and he died on Mother's Day of 2020. And he was being held in 20 hours of solitary confinement, alone and actively hallucinating. He also did not have a functioning emergency button in his cell. He died of psychogenic polydipsia, which is the overconsumption of water, which is a condition commonly associated with schizophrenia. This case highlights the lack of medical and psychiatric care in the jail, the use of solitary confinement as a routine housing classification for mental illness, the lack of emergency buttons in the cell, and the lack of adequate safety checks. The other cases that they are working on involve some of our most vulnerable community members who seriously have no recourse and have no voice out of fear of law enforcement, and that is our community of neighbors that do not have a house and they live unsheltered. And we have also experienced terrible sexual assault problems in the jails, both with staff and inmates on inmate and staff on inmate. One sexual assault case involves an inmate thrown into a cell and other inmates locked in for several days without anyone checking on them, without any due process. to be respectful of the children, you can imagine what happened. No one heard the screams. Nobody checked on this person, and it was very dangerous. And he had no working emergency buttons. The guards never came into his cell to check on him, and the unit was so overcrowded, people were sleeping in plastic boats all over the day room of the unit, including under the steps. His assailants were not prosecuted, and the jail conducted barely any investigation required by PREA. The other sexual assault cases involves staff and correctional officers, which really isn't very shocking, as Jonathan and Elizabeth kind of explained to me. This is really common in jails and prisons. They become very sexualized, and it's truly a blight on our community, what's happening in our jails. There have been incidences of police use of excessive force with our most vulnerable community members who suffer from behavioral health and mental health illnesses and that are homeless. They just settled an excessive force case with the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office for wrongful arrest and excessive force. The federal judge found on summary judgment that the deputies illegally arrested our client without probable cause for elder abuse. In the course of that false arrest, that deputy unjustifiably shot the client in the back with a taser, causing him to stiffen like a board and fall backwards, landing right on the back of his head in a parking lot. He was homeless for 15 years prior to that. He should never have to be homeless again after the substantial settlement. Another case settled this year with the Santa Cruz Police Department for brutally beating an epileptic person they misperceived as resisting arrest. He was punched in the face repeatedly while having a seizure for a minor misdemeanor. SCPD agreed to mandatory department-wide training on identifying epilepsy. There was also a similar case in Scotts Valley with Kaiser. The client was at the Kaiser in Scotts Valley to establish care, the primary care physician, and so that he could get neurological testing. Within 10 minutes, his new primary care person asked him some questions. He called the police department and asked for a 5150 hold. Scotts Valley Police Department showed up and detained him without clearly identifying themselves. They proceeded to grab him intentionally and harm him greatly. They then arrested him for obstructing their unlawful investigation of his alleged mental condition. These are just the things that we know about. And as somebody who works in the community of people that have no housing, who have had their cars towed, I don't even know where to go. I mean, I'm just so excited to see the people here that I have some cards and some resources. Like, I don't even know where to go with these complaints, because my complaint could put them at great danger. And their own complaints could elevate their harm. So that's a frightening thing that that Santa Cruz County is facing. So I am truly honored to support the work of Jonathan and Elizabeth. I'm so appreciative for their advocacy for the invisible people in our community who have no voice. And I look forward to partnering with them on sheriff's oversight. Nobody should have a budget that size with no oversight other than the bro network that I call our board of supervisors. It is not right, and we can do better. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of organizing, and the ACLU would love to partner with you. So welcome, and please come up and introduce yourselves